Welcome to Super Authentic Tales. Today, I'm excited to speak to Zuzana, a life and accountability coach who helps people find happiness. Originally from the Czech Republic, she has lived in several countries, including her current residence in Zambia. Her adventurous spirit has led her to explore different cultures and accumulate a unique life experience. She initially focused her career on intercultural relationships, but she has since expanded the practice to help people from all walks of life achieve their goals and live their best lives. She's a passionate advocate for self-care and personal development. In this episode, she will share her unique insights into her remarkable journey spanning various countries and cultures. She also discussed her role as a life coach and how she helps individuals on their paths to personal growth and happiness. So whether you're looking for inspiration from a life well lived or seeking guidance on navigating diverse cultures and personal development, this episode is for you. I have been looking forward to this conversation because I know you are an expert of intercultural relationships. You're telling people, showing them how to be happier, how to thrive in an intercultural relationships. And on top of that, I know you have quite a lot of experience living in different countries. Can you please give us a brief introduction of who you are and what do you want to share with us today?
Thank you for having me as your guest, and I will be super happy to share what I have learned, what I share with my clients, with you and with your amazing listeners. So just to kick it off, I am Zuzana Mukumai, and I am a life and accountability coach. I currently live in Zambia. This year I hit 9 years here, and it's been 13 years since I have been living in Africa. And to keep the story short, I always wanted to travel. I was very different from the rest of my family. And somehow I ended up in Africa, even though my dream countries were the Nordic countries like Sweden or Iceland, or I was really attracted to Asia. But I ended up in Africa. I started working in Zambia after I lived in different African countries, and that's where I eventually met my husband, with whom I have now almost 4-year-old son. And as many women experience, once we have a babies or get pregnant, we start to think what we want to do differently, and that's what exactly happened to me, because I spent my entire adult life working in humanitarian aid and development and cooperation. That's why I was in Africa. And suddenly I thought I need to do something different, and I started writing a blog about normal Africa, trying to show people that Africa is not just a bush full of animals and full of poor people and diseases, but I wanted to show them the real continent. And that's how over that, eventually I started coaching. I started with focusing on working with women who were in intercultural relationships. And then slowly I changed the languages, because I eventually started in my own language in Czech, then I shifted in English. And right now I mostly work with business owners or freelancers who have like two of us feet in different countries, and mostly we work on productivity, on creating healthier habits, but also relationship, dating, and generally how to feel happier in life.
Thank you so much for the amazing introduction. I think there's a lot to uncover here. I think it would be great to start by talking about your home country, which is the Czech Republic. Can you briefly tell us, in your opinion, what is Czech Republic? What is so amazing about your home country?
Well, that's a good question. What I like about Czech Republic is that I believe that people are ultimately nice. We are not that open at the first glance. Like, it can be difficult, especially for foreigners, like to get friends. But once Czech people get to know you, and I hear this also from other foreigners, that once they get to know you, they kind of take you as part of the family. So that's what I like about Czech Republic. And in addition to that, it's a peaceful country. So I am one of those fortunate people who was born. I was born just 1 year before the communism ended, so I didn't really experience that long period when we were under the communist regime. But since then, I have lived in democracy and I never experienced a war. So this is something in today's world. It's actually, if you watch news, you feel very fortunate that you come from a country which is peaceful, where you can just walk anyhow. You don't have to be scared of anything. And that's also true for Zambia, where I live now. And what I love about Czech Republic is also the nature, and that's what I miss here in Africa, because Czech Republic, I think 1/3 of the area is forest. So even if you live in the capital or in the big cities, you can just hop on the bus, on the train, and very soon you will be in forest and you can go hiking. And us as Czech people, that's one thing I think we have in common. All of us Czech people is that we love hiking. And my friend used to always say, we live together in Mongolia, and she would always say that if I see a hill, I have to climb it. And that's kind of how much we love climbing, and we have also like great nature to do that. So that in a nutshell. And of course we have amazing beer. Like we are the number one in beer consumption, even in front of Germany. So I'm not sure if that's the thing to be proud of, but we have
yes,
very
of
good beer
course.
and we have some very good dishes as well.
Wow, sounds amazing to me. And I should have told you that I'm going to visit the capital city of the Czech Republic very soon. And all of my friends, including family, and they have been telling me how beautiful Prague is. I really cannot wait.
Yeah, I'm sure you will enjoy it. It's kind of you know, when you come from a country and it's different, you live there and then the tourists coming to admire. So for me, I come from the eastern part of the Czech Republic, and near Slovakia and Austria, and Prague is for me a place where is lots of tourists, and I always get lost. So I always look out for the tourists because they always have the map, they know where they are going. So I'm like, let me find some tourists so they can tell me where to go, because I never lived there. I usually went there only to the airport. So for me, it's also kind of also touristic city, even for me when I am there. So I hope
Yes.
you will enjoy your trip.
My next question for you is that how old were you when you first left your home country? Can you remember?
Yeah, I think I was 20 or 21. I remember the trip. I went to Sweden and Norway for about 6 weeks. I went by truck from Czech Republic to Sweden. So that was my first trip at 2021.
So were you there purely sightseeing, or you were on a job, or?
It was a trip. I wanted to explore, so I didn't, and that's how I travel every time. I don't like the pre-planned everything, so I like to kind of go where I like and decide on the spot. So at that time, my father was working at some freight company, so he managed to get me a spot with his friend who was driving the truck from Czech Republic to Sweden, and then what I knew where I was arriving, and I arranged sleeping at the one Swedish guy through couchsurfing, and that's all what I knew about the trip. I also knew that in about like 2 weeks after that, I will be attending a work camp in some like ecological farm for 2 weeks, but that was it. So I really was planning from one day to another. The accommodation, I slept most of the time through couchsurfing. I don't know if you or listeners know, couchsurfing is basically you ask people to sleep on their couch, and usually they show
Yes.
you around, and it's really amazing. At that time, maybe now it's different. I haven't used it for a while, but at that time it was really amazing experience. And it was for me also the first time ever I was alone in a foreign country, and suddenly I had to speak English with my high school English, which was not very sufficient. So I remember how the truck driver dropped me at some petrol station outside of Göteborg in Sweden, and now I was like, oh my goodness, now I'm here alone and I have to speak in English.
I see. That sounds very fascinating. So tell me, why did you decide to return home? Was it purely because the job ended and you couldn't manage to find another way to extend your stay? Because I remember you said that how ideally your dream place to settle is somewhere in the Scandinavian country, and Sweden, Norway sounds to me like the ideal place for you to settle
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, so at the time it was purely a trip because I was going to go back to the university. The few months after that. So I just wanted to explore, and it was I at that time I didn't plan to stay longer. So I was there the 6 week. It was a really amazing trip. It was also the first time ever I actually interacted with people from Africa, and yeah, I actually went back to Sweden. I think a year after. I lived there almost a year when I was studying the university for the Erasmus program. So I actually came back, and I up to now I miss Sweden. Like I feel like it's still in some way my home, but I never managed to live there for longer than that 1 year
Yes,
I was there studying.
that's life, isn't it? Very funny. I guess this trip is kind of like a Pandora box that once it's open, you can't really close it. And that's why I can imagine that whenever you return home, ever since that time, you always feel the need to have to go out, to experience, to have an adventure. Have you remember or can you recall any obvious changes that you witness in yourself that, for instance, you feel like you have to go abroad every now and then after you return to your home country, say 6 months?
Um, it's funny you said it was kind of a Pandora box for me because last week I was just writing the copy for my website. It's not published yet, so you couldn't see it. But I said exactly this about this trip, that this was the first trip which made me to want to travel after that. And as I said before, I kind of had it in me, like this kind of desire for adventure. I don't know from where it came from, but I always had it with me. So after this, I went to study for 1 year to Sweden, and from there, like it all, like I met different people. I met my ex-partner then, who was from different country. That's how then I ended up in Africa, and it kind of never stopped. And when I think it's actually like 12 or 13 years since I lived in Czech Republic for more than like, I don't know, 6 months, then it makes me also wonder, like it's been really a long time I haven't lived in my own country.
Yes. So after your fairly long stay in Sweden, what happened afterwards? That why did you end up in Africa? I believe, as you said, you probably met your Biden husband so that you moved to Africa, or there was a job. I think you mentioned about you were quite keen to join some, is it the humanitarian aid kind of
Yeah.
community? So that's why you were in Africa working.
Yeah, so how it was, as you said, I met my ex partner. So at the time I was still quite young. I think I was like 21, 22. So yeah, we fell in love, and he was from Italy, and he was a couple of years older, so he was done with his studies, and he since ever he loved Africa. And I was not really interested in Africa. My dream country was Mongolia and Sweden, and Africa was kind of not on my radar. But as we started dating, I after I finished my stay in Sweden, I moved for a couple of months to Italy, working in an Italian bar, which would be another experience to talk about. But then he actually got a job in Uganda, And because I had some time, I was still finishing my bachelor at that time, so I came to visit for I think back in 2009 or 2010. And that was my first ever trip in Africa, which was very stressful for me because I had no idea what to expect. I always say the doctor who was giving me the vaccination, I think I quoted her already 100 times. She would be famous probably by now because she told me if I don't follow all the vaccinations she's recommending me, and if I die, then it's my own fault. So that's kind of the environment I was going from to Africa. But actually, I 4 weeks, it was amazing. I didn't experience like the rich Africa because at that time neither of us had much money, so we really slept in the lodges for $2 a night. So you can imagine, like, it was like the real life. I remember some nights when the door wouldn't lock properly, so I would just push like some table and chair in front of the door, like to kind of survive the night. I was really scared, but I survived the 4 weeks and I really like it. So when I finished my bachelor, I moved to Uganda and I spent there 2 years. So, and that's how I also started doing the development work, because I knew I was coming to Uganda. So I kind of approached some NGOs and I was like, hey, I'm going there, I'm going to be there. I am happy to volunteer. Do you want to use me? And that's how I started.
That's very interesting. And again, so many things I wanted to ask you. So let's take a step back. I want to ask you something about your ex-partner, who is Italian. Maybe it's difficult for you to recall, but can you still remember any doubts or any suspicion you had before you agreed to date him? Because I imagine some very conventional, traditional people, they might say that, oh no, he's not from your country, he's very different. Southern European, guy. Do you really want to date someone outside of your country? Have you ever had this doubt?
No. It never even crossed my mind. And because the way we met, it was that kind of love on the first sight. So like
Oh,
everything happened
wow.
really quickly. And he took me to his family after a couple of weeks. His family is really amazing. So it was really fast. And actually, I don't have so much experience dating Czech men, because this was my first serious relationship, and before I had a couple of boyfriends, but nothing really serious. But most of them were actually also not Czech, so I never looked for it actively. It was not like I want to have a boyfriend from a different country, but it always like happened that I ended up with boyfriend from Australia or from Iceland. So I think I have
Yes.
just like one Czech boyfriend. So I'm definitely no expert on Czech guys. So
Yes.
I never had these doubts like, why shouldn't I date somebody from a different country?
Yeah, I can definitely agree with what you said. I think those type of thoughts that you should stick with your own race, culture, or nationality is fairly outdated. I think only people who are extremely conservative would respect that type of thought. But I also want to ask you that, do you think you are particularly drawn to any, for instance, everyone has their types, right? Some people are into, say, people with darker skin, dark hair, or someone who prefer a taller guy or taller women. Do you think your preference particularly coincides with those traits, say in African guy in general, or you think in general the Czech men are not as attractive as other men you have seen in other places?
That's a
I know
tricky
it's a funny question.
And I think for me, like if I would put all the boyfriends like next to each other, I think they're all really different. I don't know if they have something really in common. And I think it was like maybe I had some kind of type. Like lots of my boyfriends then they would have long hair or the
Ah,
dreadlocks and have kind of those shape of face which some other people can say they can look a bit feminine. So and then it's completely opposite, for example, what my husband is. And um, when we talk about Africans, and I got when I started, as I said, I started with intercultural relationship, and I was doing it in Czech. So when I was advertising my first online course, I was advertising in different Facebook group, and I got really a ton of racist comments, because apparently it was a pain for mostly white Czech men to see me with a African guy. So I got like lots of hate, and there were comments like this, like, why you find somebody from Africa if you have like these like handsome Czech guys, probably meaning themselves anyway, and that would be another story. But like I kind of as with the foreign boyfriends, I never looked for a particular type of guy, at least
yes.
consciously. So when I was in Uganda, I never look at the guys. I didn't think they were really attractive in Uganda. And then I remember I came to Zambia, and like with my Czech girlfriends, we had kind of a community of Czech girls, now women living here. And we were like, how is it possible that every other guy in Zambia is so handsome? And so I don't know. We used to joke that when God was giving like the handsomeness like all over the world, they just broke the back over the Zambia because the men were so handsome. But now I see it
Mm,
also differently. Like I was telling my husband, like now, like I don't see those handsome guys anymore. Maybe it's because I'm married, right? But at that time, that was kind of the experience like I had, and it was similar to my other Czech girlfriends here. So it was never a kind of on purpose that I would say I want the African guy or I want a guy
mm,
from Iceland. It was just happening.
yes. That's why, I said earlier that how life is so funny sometimes. I want to ask you something about your adaptability, because I think I can imagine when you first moved to Uganda, I think that's your first place you lived in Africa.
Yeah.
How did you cope with the changes? I don't think it's any similar to your environment in the Czech Republic or in Italy.
No, it was completely different. And I went there first for those 4 weeks to travel, so at least I got some idea. But then moving in there, like that was a whole different story. And because Africa is really, I think it's the continent with most stereotypes about how it is here. So it was hard, and I mean, I won't lie that probably I also had some stereotypes, and it's a complicated discussion, but I think in some way we will always have the stereotypes on some level in
Yes.
us, because that's how we were kind of brought up. And like what we always heard about like certain races or continents, so we
Mm,
will probably always have some kind of bias in us. But I remember when I moved to Kampala, that's the capital of Uganda, it took me, I think, like at least a week to come out of the house alone and go to the market, which was like maybe 1,000 meters away, maybe 10 15 minutes walk. It took me really like 1 week or maybe even longer to go alone, because I was scared. Like, because when we were traveling, I was with my then boyfriend and I was never alone, and suddenly I was working and I had to kind of start living my life. And then I started the volunteering position eventually, so I had to move on the other side of Kampala. And Kampala, it's not one of the quietest cities, so there are the motorbikes, the traffic, like the police, like people walking all over the place, so it's completely different. um, so it was tough. But also on the other hand, I think I have this kind of curiosity and I am really excited to explore. So I am always the type of person who will eat the street food and the cheapest food somewhere because I want to taste it. It was really Even when I go to Thailand, I go to the like cheapest looking places when nobody speaks English. The same in China, like because I just like want to try like whatever is there and just to see the real life. So I think in this way I overcame the fear like pretty fast, and now I don't think about it anymore, of course, after all these years. But I remember the first like weeks and months in Uganda, it was pretty tough.
If you have to name one thing that made your life in those 2 months particularly tough, what would that be? For instance, is it food, climate, or safety, or hygiene?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
it
think
was
I'm being
about the
biased now.
Yeah, no, I think it was the kind of the fear because I had
Right.
all the fears of other people, right? Like when they were telling me like it's not safe to go to Africa. There are only poor people who want to take your money, and like there are all these diseases. But I was never kind of particularly worried about diseases and this kind of things. So it was more like kind of learning and feeling comfortable. So that was, I think, the one thing like I was not feeling safe because it was so different
Yes.
than my country. But now I always say, and as I said before, I'm not from Prague in Czech Republic. I'm from the eastern part, and I say always I feel safer in Zambia than in Prague in the underground,
Yes.
because I feel like when I'm there, like it feels scary to me even now. So yeah, good luck on your trip. Like I mean, it's safe, but like I find it like in some ways scarier than, for example, living in
Yes.
Zambia right now. So I think it was a lot because it was new, and I absorb all the fears of other people, what they were telling
Mm.
me. And yeah, I'm still here, and nothing
Yes.
terrible like happened to me or my family, so I have to knock it somewhere. But
Yeah. So it sounds to me that after you fully settle in Uganda and also now in Zambia, you later realize many stereotypes or biases were just simply not true. And I think that is something you have been sharing, I'm pretty sure, as a coach, especially, intercultural relationship is funny because I always say that one of them has to compromise. It's either A moves or B moves. You have to find a place, either a third place or usually, one of them's, yeah, one of their home countries. That's usually the case. So we talk about Uganda. So let's move on. So what happened between Uganda and Zambia? I believe that you met your current husband. So what happened? Can you tell us briefly?
yeah, well, so happened like after 2 years in Uganda, I lived after the initial months in Kampala. I moved to really remote region on the border of South Sudan and Kenya, when the pastoral tribes live. So it was like, I like to say, the real Africa, like the people kind of similar to Maasai's, the traditional wear,
Yes.
and still drinking the blood and milk. So I spent like basically 2 years there, and I was working for an Italian NGO. And at that time, it was I felt I needed change, like work-wise. So I started sending out CVs really all over the world. I had a couple of interviews, but the chance or the destiny wanted it to be Zambia. So I got a job in Zambia, and I was still with my ex-partner then, and I moved to Zambia. So he was supposed to come and like join me, because that was kind of the agreement, because I followed him to Uganda, then the agreement was he will follow me to Zambia, but then he didn't. He decided to take a job in South Sudan, and I don't want to go to the details because it's also like not all of it is my story to share, but it was done in a like goodwill from his side, but it just
Mm.
like didn't land well with me, because I needed him with me here. And then I spent basically, I think, 1.5 of years living in a refugee settlement here in Zambia, and I fell in love with the country. So I lived really like in a village. It didn't look like a refugee settlement like how we see in the news from the Middle East or from Asia, but it was more like an African village. And what was different from Uganda, that in Zambia, the friends I made either were like Zambian people or it was Czech people, but who lived here. So I was no longer in the expat community. In Uganda, I was more in the expat community, and suddenly here I was with people who live here, and I think that made it also different. And I really fell in love with the country. But we were still in the relationship, even though it was not going exactly well. So we moved together to Tanzania, and I remember how I was leaving Zambia. I felt like I won't make it to the plane because I was crying. I didn't want to leave. And eventually I moved to Tanzania, which is also an amazing country. I really love it. But then basically, the relationship didn't survive, and I met my husband, my now husband. And because from Tanzania I kept coming like every 3 months to Zambia to visit my friends, and eventually I met my husband, and I left Tanzania and moved to Zambia, and then I moved to Mongolia after 3 months.
So, okay, so let's focus on Africa, this continent so far. So you have lived in Uganda, Zambia, and then what's the third one? Please remind me. Yes, so you have lived in 3 different African countries. Do you think you can try to give me maybe one sentence to summarize your favorite part of each country?
So Uganda, I lived, I would say, the real Africa, as I was saying, the tribe I was living with, that was something really unique and amazing, and I'm really grateful I could experience like this traditional way of life. Then Zambia, it's kind of, I was always saying, more similar to us. It's less traditional, though there are traditional ways, but it felt, after coming from Uganda, it felt very normal, and it felt so easy to talk to people, and it felt we have similar sense of humor. And I love the Zambian nature, like, because I actually wanted to study botanics. So I have this kind of relationship to trees and flowers. So the nature is amazing here, in the trees. So I love that, and people are just friendly and really nice. And Tanzania, it's also amazing country actually. Like, people are very nice. I love Kiswahili, which is the main language. It's very beautiful language. And then it has also the coast and Zanzibar and all this, which is also amazing.
Do you think after you have tried to live in 3 different African countries, you were pretty certain at that time that Africa is the place where you want to settle down for the maybe rest of your life? Or I know that it's hard to predict the future, but what was that kind of thought in your mind?
Well, I don't think I was really thinking about it that much. It was kind of like, I loved Zambia, so I wanted to stay here. And then, like, when I met my husband, then it was kind of another reason why to stay here, because I was happy here. But it's interesting, like, as longer I stay, and now it's also different, we have a child, like, I see the things which I don't like that much, and I think it gets more intensified like when we have children. And also what is different, that at those times I really lived in the remote areas, and now I live in the city. So now, for example, like, the biggest challenge for me is the pollution, because people are burning their rubbish. And it was not, when you live in the village, people are not burning that much, or it's kind of spread. But if you live in a city of 500,000 people, when everybody is burning their rubbish in their yards, like, the pollution is really, really bad. And then you are, bringing up a child. And so right now, like, we are living here, we are not moving anywhere. But of course, I have this question, like, is this going to be forever? Because that kind of disadvantages are becoming bigger, but on the other hand, like the advantages are also there. So it's like really, I think all of us who are kind of torn between different countries or have partners from different culture, we always like experience this on certain level, because I believe there is always a good thing about one country, but also things which are not that great.
Yes, I
So
can't
maybe you
agree
have
with you more.
experienced something similar as well. So I think it's puts us in a really tricky spot, and we have to learn how to kind of deal with it without maybe
Yes.
knowing the final solution.
Um, just want to check. I believe your husband, your current husband, is he from Zambia?
Yes, yes.
So my question is, because I know that, especially you as a life and accountability coach, specializing in intercultural relationship, you must have heard people saying that how intercultural relationships are amazing and probably the most exciting compared to, for instance, people from the same culture or nations dating together. It's exciting without doubt. However, it can be difficult as well. I want to know that after you realize that the relationship with the Italian guy, your ex-partner, may not go well as you planned for, did you have any fear or doubt thinking that it could be the cultural difference or it could be the difference incurred from, say, the maybe race, maybe culture that led to the unsuccessful result? Would that ever hold you back so you don't want to date your current husband?
No, no. Again, I'm the kind of person, I jump for the things, and we were always joking with my best friend. She's the exact opposite. So for me, like, I would jump. For her, she would think for 2 years before doing something. So we were like always joking about this. That like for me, I would think like when the challenges come. And
Yes.
actually, as I said, I started like focusing on like intercultural relationship, and one of the reasons why I actually shifted more into life and accountability coaching and focusing on being happier in life from more like holistic view is because I realized that the intercultural relationships, like it relationships are hard, like generally, right? It's not an easy thing, and once there are people from two different culture, it adds extra layer, which makes it more difficult in some ways. It makes it definitely more exciting, as you said. But what I realized, and what was definitely true in my case, is that ultimately the culture differences plays smaller role than we think in the beginning, and that ultimately
Mhm.
it's about who we are as a human being. And probably
Yes.
issues I would have with any like foreign guy, I would have them probably with the same Czech guy, because it was about like how I respond to conflict or how I think about my future. And like looking back at my previous relationship, one of the like I mean the main reason why it failed is because at that time I was not able to put the relationship on the first spot. Like
Mm.
I was not ready to do that, and it was about me. And that's how I
Yes.
actually started this current relationship. But what happened is that my husband told me like, what the heck you are doing? Like you can't be like this in a relationship. And we had like big arguments because it was not I was doing something on a conscious level, but that's the only way I knew. That's how I grew up. That's how I always manage a relationship. And then because my husband told me like you can't do this nonsense, that's when I kind of start thinking like what am I doing, and I started becoming more conscious. And that's actually what also led me to start doing intercultural relationship, because of my own realization like how my past kind of patterns and luggage was influencing my like current relationship. So I kind of had a choice: either I do the things in the same way and I will probably have another failed relationship, or I start doing things different.
Yes, I think if I try to summarize what you just said, which really resonates with me, is that I think people tend to say that cultural difference is a reason why some relationships did not work. But I think at the end of the day, everyone is just unique in their own way. If we can see that person just as a person, as a being, and treat their difference, treat their behaviors, their temperament as the way they are, we probably wouldn't always use cultural difference as an excuse to say that why isn't it as successful as we hope for. I believe that's what you are trying to say, because that's my personal experience.
Yes, agree. Like you summarized it nicely.
Thank you. And then I do want to ask you something, because I can see that you have been living a very happy life with your current husband, and I'm pretty certain that you are a sweet family, and I couldn't agree with you more about, yeah, you do have some concerns about, say, whether you want to live in Zambia, say maybe in the near future, because of the child. That completely understandable. I want to ask you about how you remain a close relationship with your family and friends from the Czech Republic, because I can imagine I have been living in the UK for over, or in total, about 6 to 7 years now, which is not brief. So to me, there is time difference, and a huge time difference. Geographically, it's also super far. So I imagine it's not as close, say France to England. You don't always visit your family that often, and I know the time difference may not be as huge, but do your parents complain that, where are you, I miss you so much, when are you going to visit us next time?
Yeah, it's tough, and that's another thing which got harder when having child, because um, like once it was just me, I think like it was manageable, or I mean they probably miss me. I was somehow okay visiting once a year. But like when like having the child, like it's really tough, like on two fronts. One is because and that's maybe not very typical about not having a big African family, because for us it's basically three of us. So we get really like no help. Like we have like a nanny during the day, but it's not a family, right? So we get the help in kind of cleaning and taking care of our son during the day when we work, but like we cannot ever have a date in the evening because we have nobody
Yes.
to stay with our son, or we can't like have a weekend getaway, and like this kind of support system like we completely don't have, which is hard, like for especially if it's your first child, like as a new mom. It's, I mean, it's tough, especially if you work and try to do different things. And then the second thing why it's hard is like actually like the relationship like of my son and his grandparents, because even now we visit about once a year. So it's tough like to see that like they can't like visit like my sister, for example, she has also a son and they live in Czech Republic, so they visit much more often than us. But the good thing, and maybe that's advantage compared to you, we don't have the time difference because we are just down from the Europe. So at
Yes.
least that allow us like my son, he calls like his grandma on WhatsApp, and they can talk like pretty often. So I think this kind of saves it. But it's really hard, like not the way we grew up, that we would spend our summers at the grandmother, or she could come to our house. So unfortunately that's one of the trades-off we kind of have to deal with.
Yeah, I think family is probably always one of the hardest part in the cross cultural relationship, and it's unavoidable, because essentially to make it work, one of them has to sacrifice, one of them has to compromise. I think it's always the case, because it's impossible for us to be at two places at the same time. But the thing I wanted to ask you is that, because I remember you said that how your husband is from Zambia, so does that mean that his family, his birth family, are also far away from where you are based, and that's why it's hard for them to provide support?
No, actually, like my husband's parents, they passed away a long time ago. So,
Right.
like, yeah, so unfortunately, like, my son has no grandparents, and his family, they are quite particular. They are in touch on the phone. Some of the siblings live far in another country, but others are near, but they are mostly in touch, like, through the phone, and they don't really visit, so which is unusual. And when I started, I was working with lots of Czech women who had partners from Africa, and this was like kind of big challenge for them, like kind of how to manage the relationship with the African part of the family. So they were always telling me that I'm kind of lucky not to have all these issues and all these challenges, but I think it comes really both ways, like that it can have advantages and disadvantages. So
Yes.
it is what it is.
Yes. And the other thing I want to talk about family is because you mentioned about Asia, which is something we are going to cover later in our conversation. That you said that how you have always been drawn to Asia and you have lived in Mongolia after your stay in Africa. So, as someone who's from Asia, I'm talking about myself. I'm originally from Taiwan, and you probably have noticed that during your stay in Mongolia is that family in Asia, and I think I mainly talk about East Asia, but I think that applies to, Central Asia, for instance, India and many other Asian countries. So family is a big part in Asia. So you probably have seen families in Mongolia where, say, three different generations live together. That would be parents, their children, and the parents of the parent. So the grandparents, the parents, and the children, three generations live together, and it's still common in Taiwan. And one of the reasons for that is to provide support. But as you can see, with this kind of structure, what usually happens is conflicts. It's very common to hear that. So, for instance, how parent-in-laws cannot get along with the daughters-in-law, and the daughters-in-law usually have to tolerate and then pretend they are happy. So, as you said, I think there's always pros and cons. In your case, it's a shame that you can't really receive the support, but at the same time, I believe that you and your husband, you have the ultimate freedom to decide how you want to, teach your son.
Yeah, exactly. That's, I would say that's the biggest advantage, is like we do it our way and nobody's telling us like what we should do or what we shouldn't do. And yeah, that's I think the big advantage, like we can take out of the situation. But yeah, having not having the support, like, and like also socially, like from our for our son, like it would be great if he would have like cousins around, and like if the
Yes.
other, I mentioned there is number of Czech women in Zambia, so the other ones, they have like bigger families around, so their kids, like they have all the cousins and all the uncles and aunties, which in some way it's something we unfortunately miss.
I want to ask you one thing. It's a strange question, but I want to ask you this because you have helped with many people, I believe women in particular, who used to have or who are currently having intercultural relationships. Would you ever be upfront to them and tell them that intercultural relationships are very fascinating? It's something you will remember forever, whether it works out or not. But they can be they have hard things you need to cope. For instance, being far away from your birth family is something you need to prepare. Is this something you will tell your clients, or you usually wouldn't tell them?
Yeah, I think at those time when I had an online course, and I had yeah, a couple of individual clients then, and this is actually what I was always saying, even when advertising the courses, I was saying like it can be really exciting, fascinating adventure, but it can be really hard because there are lots of things to consider, and like most of the things, they don't show up immediately. And
Yes.
then that will be also for another discussion, but like lots of relationships are not built on the very strong foundations, so then it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, it's hard, as you said. Relationships is hard work. It's not easy. I have another very hypothetical question for you, and we don't have to publish if you don't want, because the question is, now looking back with all the difficulties that you have to deal with, if you can choose again, would you ever say no to cross-cultural relationship to avoid these problems?
I don't think so. I was actually thinking about this recently, like all the difficulties we have, and like that. It's not easy to fly, and I hate flying, by the way. So, like flying to Europe, like it's not like it's 1 hour flight. Like you would be flying from Germany to UK or whatever.
Yeah,
Like it's like one
it's
day trip,
long.
and then the
Yeah.
cost of the flight tickets, it's lots of money, like especially when your child is beyond 2 years, they pay as adults, and if your family goes, like we talk in thousands of dollars per trip. And like I was thinking about this, but then I was like, but if I wouldn't be here, I would never have this like amazing son, I would never
Yes,
have
exactly.
amazing husband, it would actually never happen. So I think I am better off like this than like kind of
Yeah.
to decide no, I wouldn't do it again.
And talking about something unique about cross-cultural relationships is that usually their children or their offsprings are very unique. Obviously, I'm not saying that your son will experience this, but it's common to know that maybe children from cross-cultural couple, they usually have identity crisis, but that's potentially a negative things, but there are many positive things about being born and raised in a cross-cultural family. I imagine that your son will naturally be bilingual, he will learn two different cultures naturally, so there's many things exciting about being in a cross-cultural relationship. There's always pros and cons.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, we are still long way to see how he will cope with it, and if he will take more the advantages or disadvantages. Of course, I hope he will more incline to the advantages and the
Yeah.
opportunities it will give. But what I have seen, like with like other couples, like where I used to work in Uganda or here in Zambia, who have like bigger kids, and or what I heard like from other experiences, it's really about, it depends a lot on the personality of the child. So there can be
Yes.
families, they have two kids and one like take really the best things out of it, and the other one like is like completely the other way around, and like
Mm.
hates moving and hates like living abroad. So I have my fingers crossed for that our son will kind of take the advantages, but it's difficult. And for example, I'm not sure if you know Trevor Noah.
Maybe
He's a
not.
comic. He's from South Africa, but he's mixed. His mother was from South Africa, and his father, I think, was it Netherlands or Europe? But he was born still during the apartheid, when this was illegal, which is like scary idea to us. But like he does stand-up comedy, and he's writer, and he worked in the US, like in the Daily Show, and he talks really nicely like how difficult was it for him, because he kind of didn't fit, like for the white culture he's black, for the black culture he's not black enough, and like
Mm.
all these things, like the mixed children like have to navigate, especially if it's like the different races, because if it's a kind of same race, you can't tell
Yes.
the difference on the first sight, but like if like African European, you can tell by the color.
Mm.
So it's and I can see that even in Czech Republic, like now we have I think there is a generation of like mixed kids who are adults now, like because there was lots of exchange even with Zambia during the socialist time, and like families happened, and like I believe still, like you can be 100% Czech, you may have lived whole your life in Czech Republic, you may have never been in Africa, but still the color will make people ask, but actually where are you from? You can't be
Yes.
Czech.
Yeah.
And like this, like
Yeah.
I think that's something which might be hard for them, but my wishes that hopefully he will manage, like, and we will be able to kind of prepare him for dealing with this. But it's still
I think
far
it,
for us, luckily.
I think it's very reassuring for me to say that. I think, yes, they may be hard times ahead as he grows up, but what is very reassuring is you are more than aware of the potential problems that he might experience, and you're preparing for that, which is really good. I think that's all you can do as a young parent.
Yes, and I mean it's hard because as everything parenting, there is not one size fit all, and you don't know exactly what you have to
Yes,
do. And even if you would do the same thing with two kids, it will turn out differently. So it's like I really think we can try to do our best, which we are all doing. And
yes.
parenting is really hard. Even if it's like whatever culture, one culture, two cultures, three cultures, like it's really really hard. So we
Yeah.
what we can do is to try to do our best.
I'm not going to ask you if you could choose again whether you would still want to become a mother or not, because I guess the answer would be a yes.
Yes, probably yes. But it's also like now deciding about more children. Like now I'm in this phase of kind of like I'm not ready for the next one yet, because now I feel finally I can sleep, I can be running my business, I can do something else.
Yes.
And like while I think it would be great to have a second child and for my son to have a brother or sister, but just I'm at this moment I'm not ready to go through that kind of the pregnancy and then the beginnings,
Yeah.
because it's really hard.
Yeah. So yeah, we talk about a lot of things, like how you move to different countries, the relationship with your family and with your husband or ex-partner from different culture. Before we move on to Asia, which is my favorite continent, obviously I'm not biased here. I want to ask you more about yes, I want to ask more about your job as a life and accountancy coach. And I think prior to that, you were mainly mentoring people who are in cross-cultural relationships. I'm very intrigued about your jobs and the people you have met online. So believe me or not, I don't think I have met many people who work as life coach. I've only met one, and I think she focusing more on how to make people, how to make them happy. I don't think she focused on cross-cultural relationships. I'm very intrigued to know that usually at what occasions would people come to you for advice on their relationships?
Yeah, so that's how I started. So the way I was creating my courses and kind of my offers, I was presenting it in a way like it was really focused. I work with women in intercultural relationships. So and there at that time in Czech Republic and I think worldwide, like sometimes we may feel very isolated when we are living in a different country or have partner from different culture, but actually there is like lots of us all over the world who have partners from a different culture, and
Yes.
in some way we all experience same challenges, and it can be some kind of challenges we can laugh about when it comes to food or some like customs and like traditional things, but then in we also deal with the bigger issues like deciding where to live, like what about children, what about the religion and all these things. So at that time like I had women coming to me. What we were talking about a lot was mostly about communication, how to reconcile the two different perspectives and find some middle ground. And also what I remember a lot, what we were talking about, like where the boundaries, like what are our like internal boundaries, like what is kind of how to differentiate between like what might be blamed on culture or what might be
Hmm.
blamed on a person, and like how much you are willing to tolerate or not. And I think it's kind of also important conversation to have, because sometimes like the problems like the couple face, it might be really like that the best way is just to separate, because it's not working
Yes.
now, and it won't work, and for various reason people want to stay in this kind of relationship, especially when it's like not equal and one partner is invested more than the other one. So yeah, so these were the topics like we were talking about, but then as I was mentioning earlier, I what I realized is that for us to be really happy, it's not enough to be happy just in the relationship, but we need to be happy with our work, we need to be happy with our community, we need to be happy like with our health and our own habits. And that's how I shifted more to the direction of life and accountability
Mm.
coaching. So that's how I started shifting more to the life and accountability coaching, because what I wanted for myself and my clients is to feel generally happy in life.
From what you said, I genuinely feel that it's a tough job, and I say so because I imagine for those who came to you, they usually were not happy. So they were usually distressed, upset, or depressed.
At that time when I was working with women in the intercultural relationship, it was really like that, because what I was saying, that I think that they came to me when it was already too late.
Right.
That it was kind
Yeah.
of like why I believe in coaching is that it's kind of, we shouldn't keep it when we feel really bad, but it's something which should be always part of our life, because it's about like how to be a better person, how to do better in future, and that's why I love coaching. But as
Yes.
I started, it was probably more mentoring, and like the women who came to me, they were like already like pretty deep in the trouble, and they could have been on different trajectory if they started working with somebody much earlier. And at that moment I felt like what they would actually need would be a couples therapy, and that's not my qualification, so I also didn't feel that comfortable doing it. While like right now, actually being a life coach, it's really exciting for me, because I work with people who want to work on themselves. They want to become
Yes.
better people. They want to become more productive. They want to have a better relationship or better dating life. And it's the kind of people who really want to learn and experiment and to be the best version of themselves, which is kind of resonating with me, because that's how I am as well. So I am really enjoying it. But at that time, in the beginnings, when I was purely focusing on the intercultural relationship and it was more mentoring, that could it was at times quite like dark for me, because I felt the people were already in a relationship that was doomed, or I
Yes.
could see that the relationship was not built on some kind of equality, because there is it's one of the stereotypes, right, about relationship with like European women with African men, especially on the coastal areas. But there are actually like lots of cases when somebody falls in love during holidays and they think they found the one person in their life, and they start sending him money, and they don't know how it's supposed to work in the African culture. And then you just see that they are being taken advantage of for wanting love. So those stories are also pretty sad.
Yes. Uh, I know it's probably going to be a difficult question, but I wanted to know that according to your experience from all the clients you have met, what is the number one or most commonly seen reason that a relationship did not work? For instance, is it usually finance or birth family or the way how a way how children should be raised?
Yeah, so statistically, I wouldn't dare to say, but what I have seen specifically, like with the like European African relationship when the ladies from the Europe and the husband from Africa. What I came across a lot was the issue of the finance and the issue of the man having to support the African family and not having like
Right.
kind of clear boundaries around like um, that now the lady, the wife, or if they have kids, that's also his family, and kind of supporting them while kind of balancing it with the need to support the family back in Africa. So that's I came across a lot
Mm,
because like in Czech Republic we have completely different setup in this. You don't ask for money to your closest people unless you are in really trouble. So this is very different culturally, and that's maybe another
yes.
advantage. I was saying I don't have to deal. We had some kind of challenges around that in the beginning, but it was not really a big issue. But I met like lots of couple when it was big issue because it felt like the relationship is stuck because all the money goes back, and then for them they don't have money to move on or kind of build their own life. So that was very tricky.
I can definitely relate to this point because, if I talk about my own background, which is Taiwan, especially if I talk about my parents from their generation or even generation that are even older, there was this stereotype that men are supposed to be the breadwinner. So they usually are the one who makes the most money, and they don't just have to support their own family, they also need to support the extended family. So it's a lot of burden on them. So I can imagine, how unhappy for men to to stuck in this type of things. The other thing I want to ask you is that I found it quite fascinating that most of your clients are women. Do you think you particularly advertise your service to women, or just in general men are less likely to be open, to be vulnerable?
Actually, like it also changed, and it was one of my big surprises because when I started I was specifically working with women. It was my choice. I wanted to work with women. And as I shifted to the life and accountability coaching, now most of my clients are actually men. And I was
That is very
like, how did
interesting.
this happen, right? Because but to be honest, with most of the men, like we don't coach on relationship. We coach more on the life, the
Hmm.
productivity, the habits. So the clients I have focusing on relationships, it's women.
It's
So it's
very interesting,
interesting.
right?
Yeah, and I actually I think it was also in the beginning I felt more comfortable working with women because I mean whoever says whatever about men and women, I think we are really different and we think in different
Hmm.
ways. And I remember when I was younger, the book the men are from Mars and women are from
Yes,
Venus.
I know.
I
I was
felt like
about to talk about that book.
yeah, so at that, like when I was a teenager, and every time I saw the book, I felt like this is stupid. Like it's like what is the difference? But now, as I like grew up, I was like 100%. Like we are different, like
Yes.
species, and like that's why I wanted to talk to women because I don't know what the men think. I can like like they are different and like what and that's something what I was not doing is like I can't like advise the women how to change the behavior of the man, right? Like what I was working on with them is like what they can do, what is like in their sphere of influence, because like there is no way we can change the man unless he wants to change. So it was like
Yes.
really focusing on that. But that's the shift, like, and realizing when I realized that actually most of my clients are men now, it was a big surprise to me. And I actually
Hmm.
really enjoy working with men. So, and it kind of started making sense because as I was growing up, I always had more male friends than a female
Hmm.
friend. So I was like, oh, it was interesting. Why did I decide to work with women? And now the men are back. So it's interesting, and it's another fun fact and the way the life is.
I'm going to be a little bit funny here by adding a disclaimer by saying that when we talk about men and women, we do show our respect to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth genders, has very important to be politically correct. We're talking about in the general terms, women and
Yeah.
men. I think it's important to focus a little bit of the life and accountability coach. So you started mentoring people, and especially women who have problems or who want to talk about their cross-cultural relationships. And then you mentioned about how, in your view, that happiness really depends on many different aspects: relationship, work, family, and then just pretty much all different aspects. And I was very much relatable to your words. So in your view, what is the biggest how can I put it? So what do you enjoy the most about your job as a life coach? Is to see your clients becoming happier, or
Yeah, like it's really like what I love as a person is learning. Like I am always happy when I can be reading a book or learning something new or meeting new people, and just kind of like the self discovery and the personal development. I have been always interested in it. Like since 20s I always read tons of books. So what I really enjoy is like that we all have so many things to learn about ourselves, about like what we want to achieve in our life. And I like to say that I am experiential life coach because I don't share with my clients something I read in a book. Like what I share is like what I have gone through myself or what I have tested myself. So I'm kind of my first like experimenting ground, like that I tried
yes,
what I am doing for my clients, I'm doing it for myself. And just seeing like how sometimes like a short conversation and small tweak in doing things differently can change somebody's lives. It's pretty amazing. And why I love coaching, and I always have a coach as well, is because we all have the blind spots, and the way we are designed as humans, we just like need to talk to other people and have the conversation and have this back and forth, so we can kind of bounce our ideas, we can get different perspectives. And I think like what I love about this is like that our mindset is really something we can work on. And unfortunately most of us, we were brought up in certain way that our mindset, the way we think, what we believe, it actually doesn't really serve us. Like we all have this strong voice that is telling us you are not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not beautiful enough. Like we all experience this. But what I love about coaching that and like mindset is one of the core work what I do with my clients is that once we change it and we change the things we believe about ourselves, we believe about others, we believe about the situation we are in, like it can really make us happier. And it's just small thing, maybe from outside it looks like nothing, but just like the way you relate to things that happen to in life can change everything, because shitty things will keep happening to us in life. We're like, we can't avoid it, like there is no way. And but once we learn how to kind of take it as a gift or opportunity and make something positive out of something seemingly negative, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
yes. And I can imagine that with the increasing popularity of social media and many different resources on the internet, I believe this job as a life and accountability coach is only getting popular, right? I don't think it's not a new job, but I believe it's getting more popular.
Yeah, I believe it's definitely not a new job, and I think that's a great. I think it's different in different cultures. So, for example, like I feel like in the US, it's so much more common for people to work
Mm,
with coaches than in some European countries. But I see it like it's really changing. Like when we were growing up, I don't think I ever heard about somebody having a coach unless you were in
mm.
sports, right? Like a soccer coach. So now I think it's really changing, like generally, like that people acknowledge this kind of, that it's easier and more fun to do this together,
Yes.
like somebody who is in your corner, who supports you, who is not scared to tell you something uncomfortable. And it's just like, I think people really start seeing the benefits of like what it can do for you to work with a coach.
Yes. And out of curiosity, can you briefly tell us the type of trainings that you receive in order to become a coach?
Yeah. So for coaching industry, it's not regulated as, for example, therapy. Like if you want to be a therapist, you need to have the former certification and like all the training. So coaching, it's basically anybody can call himself or herself a coach. So for me, I have a certification in positive intelligence, which is kind of a coaching school, which works a lot with the inner critic and the stories we tell ourselves and how we change kind of the negative, seemingly negative things to the positive. So it's a lot about mindset. So that's the certification I have. And lots of coaches are certified under the International Coaching Federation, which is like the body which is usually like recognized. But for example, I don't have the certification because I found that it was not a priority for me. And as I said before, I really come from my experience and from my own mistakes, and that's how I also started this life, because I felt like I did all these mistakes, I did all these stupid things, and why other women in similar relationship, why they should do the same if they can avoid it.
Mm,
So for me, it is not really that important, the certification. And to be honest, none of my clients ever ask me like if I have a certification. So the way I get my clients, it's we usually have like the 30 minutes session, we talk, and then we decide if we want to work together. So it's really about, I think what is really important with coaches is that you find a person that fits you. Even I
yes.
had some amazing coaches, and they also don't have a official certification because it's, but they are really, really good coaches.
Mm,
So it really depends. And 100% there are people who want to have certified coach, so, and that's completely fine, and they will find their coach. And there are people for whom it's not that important, and then they find a coach that kind of is good for them. And I always say that to the people I talk to, like, you really want to find a coach like you feel 100% comfortable, you can feel
yes.
100% open, and if you don't feel the connection, then don't do it, because like you want to find somebody who you can really be open. And because you will be talking about uncomfortable things like fears and like the things which are kind of stopping you, and it's not nice thing to do sometimes, to look into the wardrobe and see what is in there.
Yes, I'm so pleased that I have found you because I can see that potentially how I'm going to become really your real client. It is quite likely because I'm having a cross-cultural relationship. I live in a different country, and imagine if I one day have child, I may have experienced exactly the same problems as you have been facing now. So yes, let's keep in touch and we will see. So yes, we talked so many things and I have learned so much from you. I want to talk about the last bit of our conversation, which is the most exciting part. It will just basically like a chat between us. So you know that, as I said earlier, I'm from Asia. I'm originally from Taiwan, and you said to me earlier how that you have always been kind of drawn to the Asian culture, but we know that Asia is massive. That's the biggest continent in the world. For instance, the East Asian culture can be very different from the, say, Central or even technically Mid-Eastern, places. It's just so different. Why did you choose Mongolia, may I know?
I don't know. It's like I always had it like that. I wanted to go to Mongolia. Like Well, and that's maybe why I'm drawn to Asia, because I believe in reincarnation and past life. I have no idea how I came to
Ah,
believe it. Nobody like in my family believes it, and I mean, I remember some parts of my past lives, like a small bits. And when I say it like to
interesting.
people around, like they think you can be crazy, but I mean, it is what it is. And like, for example, I was always drawn to Japan. I have never been, but I have like also still dreams about Japan, and like I have idea where I could have been living there in the past. And this kind of Mongolia was a country I really wanted to go. I have no reason why. I have been vegetarian like for 20 plus years, so people were like, why do you want to go to Mongolia? People just eat meat, like you will not survive. But I mean, I spent there just 6 months, so it's not a very long period. But I just love the country, and like it's been 7 years since I lived there, but I feel like I still think about the country every day. And I remember like moments when I would sit the traditional, it's called ovo. I don't know, people can Google it. It's the traditional kind of, it's a hoop of stones with the prayer flags, and it's kind of the praying place. Like when you travel around, you have to spill some vodka around, like as a kind of gift to gods. And it's not the Buddhist tradition, it's like the
Yeah.
pre. And I remember moments when I would sit near of like these ovos and like really feel like this is my place. And it's
Hmm.
difficult to explain in the words, but that's how I feel it. And yeah, I hope I will be back in Mongolia because it's really amazing country.
I would never ever say you are crazy if you say that you feel that your past life was somehow related to Asia, because I think this type of idea was from Buddhism. And
Yeah.
yes, Buddhism is a essential part of the culture in the majority of countries in Asia. That includes Taiwan, where I'm from. So I think that element or that type of idea is called reincarnation. And I
Yeah.
remember growing up in Taiwan, the teacher from the secondary school, she always said that she actually forces us to recite some text from Buddhism in which it says that if you don't do like good things, or if you don't behave well in your life this time, then you will be doomed to become a turtle, a fly, a dog. And then, so basically, you have to do many, many good things to ensure you will become a human again in your afterlife. And no one ever in my class or my friend, no one say that this is stupid. We just kind of accepted it. But yes, growing up, especially after you experience different culture, you might start wondering, does that make sense? Is that scientifically correct? I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't believe in that, because in my view, essentially what it tries to say to people is that just be a good person, behave.
Mm.
It might really do you some good. You don't know.
Yeah, and like as you said, it's really about like the culture you come from, because
Yes.
the idea of reincarnation of past life, it sounds like like nobody, or like almost nobody's believing in, because Czech Republic until the communism period, it used to be a Catholic country. Now it's the most atheist country. So like this kind of culture is completely absent from there. So that's how I have actually like no explanation how it would come to me, right? Other than it's reincarnation
Yeah.
or something, because it's not like I would be hanging out with people who were Buddhist, or I would be some part of some community. No, at the same way I became vegetarian. It's like when I was 15, I was like, it's wrong to kill animals. Like, why should I do that? And I just stopped, and I never ate the meat since then. It's been like more than 20 years now. So it's really interesting. And that's and talking about Buddhism, I 100% like I don't identify as a Buddhist or any other religion, but just remembering like in Mongolia, so there are these the Ovos I was talking about, like the traditional kind of religion, but there are also like there is the Mongolian Buddhism. And during the weekends when I lived in Ulaanbaatar, I would go to the temples and I just feel good. Like when I see churches, I feel uncomfortable. Like it makes me stressed. I don't know why. It's like in me, I feel like I just want to get out of the church. But I used to go to the Buddhist temples, like they have, I don't know how it's called in English, those prayer thing you spin and all this, and I just felt comfortable.
And this one bit I want to talk to you about Asia, which is very relaxing. So one thing I do get homesick, which is probably the last part of our conversation I want to ask you. So for me, something that would make me very homesick is food. I want to know that you probably feel that your past life has something to do with Asia, but or do you think you are drawn to Asia because of the food there?
I was like, when you were saying it will be our last question, I was like, please let it be food.
Yes,
So,
I love the food there. It's so
yeah.
amazing.
Now, my absolutely favorite food is Chinese food.
Oh,
And
yes.
followed by
Good
Thai,
choice. Good choice.
probably. Yeah, so I really love Chinese. And then I would say the top three, like, it's like Chinese, Thai, and Italian, which is very different
Ah,
than for
good
me. But
choice.
I
Good
also
choice.
love Korean and like all the food.
Good choice
Maybe
too.
not the traditional Mongolian because it's just meat, but like
Mm,
just Chinese food is amazing. And especially in China, I spent only, I think, 10 days in China. We went by land from Mongolia up to Beijing, and so I didn't see big part of China, but the food was just amazing. And
yes.
yeah, so
Yes, I
definitely,
know.
I don't think I was drawn to Asia because of the food, because at that time I had no idea about the Asian food, but I love Asian food.
Yes, I can definitely agree with your sentiments totally. And that's why I mentioned earlier about when I feel homesick, I usually make home food. So tell me, as you, I think as you have been having, no, you have been living as an expat. Can I call you an expat for a long time? Probably more than a decade now. How do you cope when you feel homesick or you no longer feel homesick that you literally treat Zambia as your home now?
Yeah, so for me, I don't really miss, I think, Czech Republic as the country itself. Like, what I miss is some more of the European thing, like the nature kind
Right.
of, and the cleanliness and not burning, this kind of thing. And then sometimes I miss my friends. So it's always good when I go to back Czech Republic, I see my friends, but at least we have WhatsApp, Zoom these days. So usually
Mm,
when I feel homesick, I call my friends. I'm not very big on. I love eating, but I'm not very big on
yeah.
cooking. So from the Czech food, I eat lots of soups. So that's, I would say, that's one of the things which remained with me from the Czech Republic. But that will be about it. The most of the traditional Czech foods are with meat and or have more complicated dishes which I don't even know how to cook. So for
Yeah.
me, if I'm homesick, I usually it's more about missing friends. So I just call them, and yeah, I think with the years going on and on, I carry less and less food in my luggages. Like from Czech Republic here, I used to bring lots of chocolates and this kind of things, but now I kind of stopped because I stopped
Yeah.
eating so many sweets. So yeah, that's it.
So, do you think, for instance, if you now feel upset, you want to find someone to talk to other than your husband, do you think you will go to your long-term friend from the Czech Republic or someone from Zambia? Basically, do you think which country, yeah, which people that you feel the closest to?
Yeah, I think I still talk like to those friends I have from the period of high school, and that's one of the things. Actually, I didn't mention that, but that's I found lots of women who live abroad have the same experience. Is creating this kind of long-lasting, deep friendships we created when we were at high school. And
Yes.
we may have friends, but it's not. It's more on the surface level. It's not that deep, and we all agree that we really miss those friends. Like you have known them for 20 years, and even if you don't see them 2 years, you go, then you meet, and you can just start talking like you met yesterday. So
Yes.
that's something. Uh, yeah, I yeah that's how I, if I need to talk to a real good friend, I usually call my best friend. And then as I started also the business, and like lots of my life is around like running a business and being a coach, I have a good amount of like new friends who are kind of
Mhm.
like from the business area. So that's also important, like to have this kind of support system as well.
Yes, that sounds reasonable to me, and I can definitely relate to you. I think to conclude our conversation, I think it would be great for you to just to give maybe one sentence or two to talk about your experience, or what is your advice to people who have experienced difficulty in cross-cultural relationship. And the second thing that I want you to advise on is that, in your view, what is the secret to have a happy life?
So when it comes to the relationship, what I would really advise is to be curious and don't
Mm,
take things personally. I think these two things, like if you don't take things personally and are curious about what is happening for yourself, what is happening for your partner, then it will kind of give you so much more power in communication. And ultimately, it's about the communication. So the curiosity part, it's about kind of trying to understand like what is whatever meaning, right? I like giving the
yes.
example, if you travel in a new country and it's a culture you have never been before, and then you see a woman doing something strange, as a traveler you wouldn't come to the woman and tell her, no, this is stupid, don't do it like this, do it like this, and I don't even know what you are doing, but just don't do it like this because that's wrong. You wouldn't never do it, right? But we often tend to do this in a relationship, like feeling like we
Yes.
have the patent for knowing how to do things right, and just kind of being curious about why is my partner being upset because I said ABC, like why am I getting upset because he came 10 minutes late, and kind of being curious about what is happening, and on the things, not taking things personally. And I think this might also relate to the second question, like how to, the recipe for happier life is that we naturally feel like we are the center of universe, and the way we are designed as a human is like we kind of interpret everything in our like direction, that everything is about us. But unfortunately, maybe it's a bad news for somebody, but most of the times, most of the things are not about us. We are just one person in a billion, and whatever challenge in the relationship may seem, it's about us. Like we feel, oh, he doesn't love us, or if he would love us, he would respect us. It's like usually not about us. Like I'm thinking of an example of like, and that's happened to me as well, that I'm home waiting for my husband. It used to happen a lot in the beginning of the relationship before I kind of analyzed it and understood. And he would come home maybe at 8 or 9, and I would be very upset that he comes late, and my interpretation would be like, oh, he doesn't love me, he doesn't want to spend time with me,
Mm,
and like I am not good enough, and all this judgment about myself, about him, and taking it, the fact that he came late at home was about me. But it was not about me at all. Like people working multiple jobs in Zambia, it's quite normal because the formal jobs are scarce. So people really have to hustle to get jobs. And, often the way things work here, he would get delayed somewhere. And it had like nothing to do with me. So
Mm.
this kind of power of not taking things personally, and that let me segue to the second thing, like how to be happier in life. It's once we stop taking things personally, it will give us so much more courage to do things, because if we look at from achieving our goals or being more productive, we all have the fears that are stopping us because we take it personally, like we are scared to give speeches because we feel like we are not good enough or people will be bored, and this kind of fear and taking things personally, it stops us from doing the steps we need to take to go after our dreams. So that would be one thing towards, like, if you want to be happier, learn how to not to take things personally. And the second thing I would say is learn how to stop listening to your inner critic, because inner critic, all the stories we tell to ourselves how not good enough we are, it's all lies, and we will always hear it. We will always hear the
Mm.
noise. Even the most successful people hear it. But what we can learn is to actually not listen to it on a way that we don't act on it, that we just hear it and then we do our thing. So I can still be scared of speaking in public. I will still hear it like, no, you are not good enough, you have the Czech accent, it's not good enough, your English is not perfect, just don't do it. So I hear it, but then I go and make the speech. And that's, I think it's really important for us, like, to really go after our dreams by not taking things personally and then not believing what our inner critics tells us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Super Authentic Tales. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow for more. Until we meet again, stay safe and continue your pursuit of happiness. Thank you again for being part of this community. Until next time.